Have you ever had someone look you up and down and decide you weren't capable? Someone who judged you by your clothes, by your tired face, by your background, and treated you as if you were invisible? Well, this is the story of Marina Santos, a 19-year-old girl who worked during the day, studied at night, and carried on her shoulders the weight of being the first in her family to try college, and how she gave the most unforgettable lesson the Federal University of Sao Paulo had seen in its 80 years of history. But to understand what happened on that cold Tuesday in May, I need to tell you who Marina Santos was and who Professor Enrique Montero was. Two completely different worlds about to collide in a way no one expected. So come with me through this story, because I guarantee that in the end, you'll see that sometimes the greatest lessons come from the most unlikely people. Marina woke up every day at 4:45 in the morning, not by choice, but by necessity. The alarm clock rang in that tiny 8-square-meter room she shared with her mother, Dona Rosa, a woman with calloused hands who cleaned office buildings during the night. "Breakfast is on the table, honey," whispered Dona Rosa, always careful not to wake the neighbors through the thin walls of the tenement in the eastern outskirts of Sao Paulo. Marina drank the bitter black coffee. There wasn't always money for sugar and rushed out to catch 2 buses downtown, where she worked as a waitress in a snack bar. 8 hours on her feet. 8 hours smiling at rude customers, cleaning tables, serving sandwiches to people who made in a single month what her family didn't see in an entire year. And worst of all, constantly hearing, "Wow, you're so young. Shouldn't you be studying instead of working?" If only they knew. If only they knew Marina was studying. That at 6:30 p.m., she rushed out of the snack bar, caught 2 more buses, and arrived at college already late for class. That she studied with photocopied handouts because she couldn't afford textbooks. That she did her homework under the streetlight when the electricity went out in the tenement. But Marina had a dream, and that dream had a name: civil engineering. She wanted to build affordable housing, bridges, schools. She wanted to make a difference in the lives of people like her. You know what impressed me most about Marina? She never played the victim. She never used her struggles as an excuse. On the contrary, every obstacle made her more determined. Every no she heard became fuel for "I'll prove I can do it." On the other side of the story was Professor Enrique Montero, 52 years old, a PhD in mathematics from USP, a postdoc from Princeton, an impressive resume and a reputation that was, well, let's just say controversial. Professor Enrique came from a traditional Sao Paulo family. Father a lawyer, mother a doctor, raised in expensive private schools his whole life. For him, the public university was home turf. Graduated there, got his master's, his doctorate, and had been teaching there for 15 years. The problem wasn't competency, was brilliant. The problem was arrogance. He believed intelligence was a birthright. Either you were born with a gift or you shouldn't even bother trying. And students who worked, who arrived late, who asked obvious questions, to him, they were just taking up seats that should belong to real students. "University is not a place for people who want to play student," was his favorite phrase. And he repeated it any time he saw someone yawning in class or asking to go over something again. What he didn't understand was that behind every yawn was someone who had slept 4 hours. Behind every obvious question was someone struggling to grasp concepts others had learned in expensive prep courses. But on that Tuesday in May, Professor Enrique was about to learn a lesson Princeton had never taught him. That day it rained in Sao Paulo. Marina rushed out of work. The snack bar had been packed, and she had to stay 15 minutes longer. On the first bus, traffic was at a standstill. On the second, even more delays. By the time she arrived at college, it was already 710 p.m. Advanced calculus had started at 7. She ran up 3 flights of stairs, her sneakers squeaking against the wet floor, her hair dripping, her backpack soaked, her breath short. She stopped at the door of room 204. Through the glass, she saw Professor Enrique explaining a complex equation on the board. The whole class was focused. Total silence. She took a deep breath. She knew she'd get scolded, but she couldn't afford to miss this class. Advanced calculus was one of the toughest courses, and she couldn't pay for tutoring if she fell behind. She turned the doorknob slowly, hoping not to make a sound. But the old door groaned loudly. Professor Enrique stopped mid-sentence. The entire class turned. 45 pairs of eyes stared at Marina standing there, dripping water onto the floor. He set the chalk down, crossed his arms, and spoke with that voice everyone knew, cold, sharp. Miss Marina Santos, how nice of you to join us. Marina closed the door and started walking to her seat at the back. Each step felt like forever. Her classmates looked at her with a mix of pity and embarrassment. No, 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 said the professor. Since you've interrupted my lecture, since you thought your convenience mattered more than the class learning, why don't you show us what you know? Marina froze. Professor, I'm really sorry for being late. Can I just sit and follow the class? Of course you can. But first, solve this problem. He pointed at the board. A second-order differential equation applied to a physics problem about damped oscillations. Advanced content. Introduced only that very lecture. Professor, Marina whispered, could you give me a few minutes to review? I just walked in and... A few minutes? He let out that infamous laugh that chilled students to the bone. My dear, this is not a game. This is engineering. This is for people who take their studies seriously. He began pacing the room, hands behind his back like a general inspecting his troops. You know what the problem is with you people who work during the day? You think you can come here and get the same results as those who dedicate themselves fully. You think effort replaces preparation. The class was dead silent. Some students shook their heads, uncomfortable. Others stared at the floor, thankful they weren't the target. Marina's cheeks burned, not from shame, but from a controlled anger rising inside her. Then came the words that changed everything. Tell you what, Miss Santos, let's make a deal. If you solve this problem right here, right now, in front of everyone, no books, no help you'll admit I was wrong about you. More than that, it'll pay your rent for a year. 12,000 raise. In cash. The classroom erupted in murmurs. Some whispered, wow. Others, this is crazy. Someone said, don't do it, Marina. He raised his hand for silence and added, but when you fail annual fail, you admit right here in front of everyone that you don't belong here, that you're taking the spot of someone more prepared, and you withdraw from my class. The silence that followed was crushing, the kind you could feel pressing on your chest. Marina looked at the board, looked at him, looked at her classmates, and then, with a voice steadier than she expected, she said, I accept. She walked to the board like she was walking toward her fate, and, in a way, she picked up the chalk, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from pure adrenaline. She read the problem once, twice, 3 times. It was tough, a differential equation applied to a critically damped system, the kind of problem that required not just technical skill, but mathematical intuition. The professor leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a smug smile on his face. In his mind, the game was already won. But Marina began writing, breaking the equation into smaller parts, identifying the system, applying the basics. Step by step, as she worked, something unexpected happened. The professor moved closer. His smug smile began to fade, replaced by curiosity. She wasn't just using the standard approach. She was doing something different. She had realized the problem could be solved more elegantly using Laplace transforms combined with frequency response analysis. Where did she learn that? He thought. The truth was Marina had learned it on YouTube, on sleepless Saturday nights. She watched lectures from professors all over the world, MIT, Stanford, Russian, Indian, Brazilian teachers. She had built her own method. She had to take a concept and look for explanations until it made complete sense. She didn't have expensive books, but she had determination and internet at the corner cyber cafe. 15 minutes passed. Marina was closing in. The solution was taking shape, and it was beautiful. Not just correct, but elegant, efficient, creative. The professor was no longer leaning back. He was glued to the board, checking each line, each step. His face had completely changed. The class was mesmerized. Even those who didn't fully understand the math knew something extraordinary was happening. Marina wrote the last line, put the chalk down, turned to the class, and simply said, "Done." Professor Enrique approached the board like one approaches a masterpiece. He checked the first line, the second, the third, went back and checked again. 5 minutes of silence. Just the sound of chalk scratching as he recalculated to be sure. Finally, he turned to Marina, his face red not from anger, but from something he hadn't felt in years, shame. "How where did you learn this approach?" Marina looked him in the eyes, not with anger, not with arrogance, but with a calm dignity that silenced the room. "Professor, I work 8 hours a day just to be here. I don't have time for games. I don't have money for expensive books or private lessons. What I do have is determination. One thing I've learned working since I was 14 is that you should never judge people by appearances. And when you truly want something, you find a way." The class erupted in applause. Slowly at first, then louder, until the entire room was on its feet. The professor stood there, watching his student applaud Marina. And for the first time in 15 years of teaching, he felt small. "Marina," he finally said, when the clapping died down, I owe you a public apology." And then something no one at the Federal University of Sao Paulo had ever seen happen. Professor Enrique Montero, the man who had humiliated hundreds of students, apologized. "I was wrong, completely wrong. And not only do you deserve to be here, but you have much to teach all of us." The next day, he showed up at the snack bar where Marina worked. He brought an envelope with the 12,000 raise he had promised, and more an offer for a research scholarship. But you know what Marina did? She accepted the money because she needed it but turned down the scholarship. "Thank you for the opportunity, Professor, but I'd rather keep earning things my own way. You can give that scholarship to another student who needs it." This happened 3 years ago. Marina graduated last semester with honors, got a job at one of the country's largest construction companies, and is already helping design a housing complex in the eastern outskirts of Sao Paulo. And Professor Enrique? He never humiliated another student again. On the contrary, today he's known as one of the professors who most supports low-income students. Because sometimes the most unlikely people are exactly the ones who have the most to teach us about determination, about humility, about never giving up on our dreams, and about never, ever underestimating someone based on appearances. Because in the end, it's not where you come from that matters. It's how far you're willing to go.